Coming up in the Innovation Sandbox today, we're talking all about DevOps, from traditional DevOps to DataOps, from testing ops to AI and ML ops. And maybe we can even find a way to toss in my favorite, special ops. We'll dive into these areas and more live in 30 seconds. So grab your shovel, get prepared to dig in to the world of ops. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Prolific's Innovation Sandbox. Standing in for Kirsten Kraft this week, I'm Matt Garst, and I'm super excited to be your guest host this week. Today, it's all about ops. It's not just your grandfather's DevOps anymore. There are so many new and updated strategies to the traditional ways of doing DevOps. I've got a whole host of great Prolific's experts with me today, so without further ado, let me introduce you to our guests for this week's installment. Sitting in the guest spot again this week is Greg Hopkinson, our Chief Technology Officer and Innovation Center Sensei. Joining Greg this week is Wayne Scott, Practice Head of Enterprise Analytics, Baz Ahmed, Business Development Manager for Testing, and last but never least, Chris Brown, Head of the Information Management Practice. As always, make sure you type your questions down in the chat box at either the bottom or the right of your screen, and we'll have plenty of time toward the end for all of your Q&A. So let's get started. DevOps Combat Team, welcome to the Innovation Sandbox. So let's get started with DevOps as a concept. Greg, I'm going to toss this one over to you. I know you've seen your fair share of updates in the realm of DevOps. I want you to tell us a little bit about the origin and how it's evolved over the years. But most importantly, you must answer a very important question. How in the heck did your journey to DevOps start out with a rubber chicken?
Thank you, Matt. So I will definitely save that question for the end. So let's tease that one and do it, handle that in Q&A. But my journey did, honest to God, start with a rubber chicken. Let's start off. So a little bit of background on DevOps. DevOps started off with continuous integration back in the early 2000s. So it's been with us for a while. And I remember when, the 2000s seemed like the future, that's 20 years ago that these techniques have been with us. And it all started around agile. So agile at that point was being incredibly successful at delivering waves of change in development. And agile was so successful that although the development teams were being much more efficient, this moved the bottlenecks onto our operations team. So a lot of waiting was happening. So developers were waiting for environments, testers were waiting for deploys, and there was a lot of room for improvement. So continuous integration came first. And then the obvious question was asked, so why not automate the deploy? We're now automating builds. Let's now automate the deploy. And we then had continuous delivery came into the play. So automated deploys to environments, but somebody still has to go and push a button to kick off that deploy. So for some, it's actually gone to the next step, which is with enough quality checks built in, with auto detection of issues in your environments, if you've got an automatic control of rollouts, you can actually get to the ultimate in DevOps, which is continuous deploy. And that means code gets deployed all the way to your environments and nobody has to touch a button anywhere in that process. So there's massive cumulative benefits that have come for the development and operations teams with all of these different techniques. But there's been some common themes that have come out. So the themes of automation, obviously, the themes of pipelines, improved visibility and communications between these teams. So as soon as development and operations teams got all these benefits, the other teams were all knocking on the door as well. So QA was already all in on DevOps from day one. QA is very much the central part of DevOps practice. But then security and the security team started getting involved. And we had the emergence of DevSecOps to bake in security early on in your applications, and even the data team. So what about applying DevOps to data pipelines or applying DevOps to AI, machine learning, training and models? So DevOps has really become this banner for change, not just between development and operations, but across the whole IT organization and even beyond. So we will get back to that rubber chicken story.
Yeah, because you're avoiding that, but that's okay. We'll get there. We'll get there. I won't let people down. So you've really talked a lot. You're talking about the data, how fundamentally important the data is, and really bringing in AI, machine learning. So Wayne, I want to toss a question over to you. I want to pull a thread a little bit more. What is the relevance, of DevOps with data and analytics?
Well, the short answer, I think, Matt, in the beginning is that there wasn't a whole lot of relevance. In the bad old days, and Greg, I think you're saying DevOps, the whole thing's been around, 20 years?
Yeah.
I think I first became aware of DevOps probably about 15 years ago. And so, being in the data world, I won't say that we completely ignored it, but it was a thing that you'd hear about at conferences. And the fact is, when you went back to your day job and kind of looking at what you were doing, you'd go back to doing things the way that you did them, which at the time involved a lot of ad hoc scripts. And this wasn't just because of the not invented here syndrome, because it didn't come out of the data world, we didn't want to do it. When you looked at a lot of what the vendors were doing, I won't mention any names, but in the BI and the ETL space, those tools and those vendors did not integrate with the off-the-shelf DevOps capabilities, or they poorly integrated. So things like version control and continuous release were not really well supported by the off-the-shelf technologies. So fast forward to current times, and what I will say is that data-driven organizations need data-driven applications. And so for better or worse, the data and the application worlds are coming together. And the cooperation now that's necessary to basically pull off continuous release means that I not only need DevOps, I need DataOps as well. And the idea of doing multiple continuous releases, so as we've seen with the Googles and the Amazons of the world, in your application, you want to embed predictive insights. And in order to do that, you need to be able to release those algorithms and have them go through the same disciplines that your DevOps and application world goes through. So the good news is it no longer requires a superhuman effort, no longer requires that, I go brew my own special automation scripts and whatnot. And I'm just going to point to a couple of things. So one of them is something that if you've not heard about it, you will be hearing about it, and that's AutoML. And so this is a capability that automates and systematizes the tuning and release of your predictive algorithms. So there's a whole set of things that it automates, and you can kind of look at that more offline. But that's a capability that's making DevOps in the analytics world quite possible and quite easy to do. And then the other thing, which you'll be hearing more about in a minute, is the automation of testing scripts. So in the beginning, again, the automation testing scripts was more focused on front-end applications and user interfaces. But today, there are quite a few technologies, and it's a quite mature area in which you can get the generation of the data that you need for data-intensive applications, reports, and other things. You can get that automated as well. And so, as I say, like in today's world, the relevance is there for DataOps, and the capability to actually do it is there as well. So the things have matured quite a bit.
That's very, very interesting. I mean, so Chris, I'd like to continue down. We're on a great path, and I'd like to continue down it a little bit. We brought up DataOps and MLOps. Can you help us understand sort of the relationship between DataOps and MLOps in the DevOps journey?
Absolutely, Matt. And I think really data is the key foundation to any of the analytics, ML, AI ops that Wayne was talking about. And in order to be able to have a presentation layer, the painting on the wall outside, you need to have good plumbing. You need to have good data that's trusted and governed and moved correctly. And in order to do that, we need to tie into whatever we can as far as the core DevOps processes are concerned. But at the end of the day, you're still talking about data. And along that comes with certain regulations and guidelines. So you need to have segregation of duties. You need to make sure that PII is in compliance. The new rulings, GDPR and CCPA, that all ties into making sure that we don't have every man and his dog in a production environment playing around with the key data assets that move and govern the data. So that segregation of duties is critical, but once you get into a position where you govern and trust the data, then Bob's your uncle. You've got a presentation layer that you can believe in.
Yeah, definitely. Now, it was interesting. Both Greg and especially Wayne brought up about testing, and so many organizations, I think, really look at a lot of the testing toward the end of the DevOps journey, but in reality, it's part of the entire DevOps journey. Guys, I'd really like for you to talk about AI and machine learning as a critical part of the DevOps journey.
Thanks, Matt. Well, to answer your question, we've seen exciting developments within testing using AI and machine learning to support an organization's journey to DevOps, and through the use of what we like to term intelligent automation. The challenge has always been, how can you ensure quality when you're looking at faster and more frequent delivery? Where organizations would have taken days, weeks, if not months to undertake testing manually, automation is doing it in a matter of minutes or hours. Now, automation in testing has been around for decades, but what we're seeing now is with AI and machine learning are enabling organizations to achieve far greater levels of automation in supporting DevOps. Areas that were previously done manually can now be automated. We can use machine learning to auto-learn a system and generate tests automatically. We can use machine learning to auto-mine for test data in production systems, or use AI to create artificial test data sets. And that's particularly relevant, as was mentioned previously, for data laws such as GDPR here in the UK and CCPA in California. We can use machine learning to predict defects even before they arise through predictive analytics. By analysing trends, organisations can target test effort more intelligently. Machine learning can even update tests with no human intervention through what's termed as self-healing scripts that can identify changes to an application and update scripts all automatically. But don't get me wrong, AI machine learning isn't just about replacing manual testers with automated software robots. It's actually helping to democratize automation too. So no longer is automation in the hands of engineers or coders. It can enable manual testers, BAs, and even business users to create automated tests through codeless automation. And it's these powerful concepts, Matt, that are being used successfully by organizations, chasing that elusive trinity of faster, more frequent delivery whilst maintaining quality. I hope that answers your question, Matt.
It definitely did. So, you know what? So, Greg, I'm gonna come over to you for a minute. I was reading an article where it talked about how 65% of initial pilots of DevOps fail to get off the ground. And as I was reading the article, it appeared as though it was because when they do these pilots, they're in the perfect optimal environment, and so of course they're going to be successful. But then when they started taking those pilots and now rolling it out to the enterprise, it became non-optimal, and organizations, and they really struggled to truly embrace everything that they needed from DevOps and to scale it out across the entire enterprise to be effective. So, I mean, in your opinion, how would effective organizations implement DevOps across the enterprise?
Yes, there's a few interesting things to say on that. So firstly, the one thing that I guess we've spoken about a lot of different aspects of DevOps. So DevOps can potentially bring a lot of change, a large amount of change and improvements to an organization. But any large amount of change like that's always a little bit scary for an organization. So it's good to keep in mind that this is a journey we're going on. You're not going to do everything on day one. It's a journey, and you may be at different portions of that journey in different teams. But the good news is it doesn't matter where you are on that journey, you're going to keep getting value the whole way. So as you evolve from continuous integration to continuous delivery and maybe even continuous deployments, you're going to get those tighter cycles. As you start integrating in things like automated testing and post-deploy monitoring, all going to improve your quality, building in security early on. Everything's going to be, it's a multiplier. You're adding in and you're getting additional value on this DevOps journey. But I guess, so how best to structure that journey is, I'm going to give you the consultant's answer. So when you don't know whether you should do something top down or bottom up, the consultant's answer is, well, you do both. And really, so bottom up, and the pilot you spoke about, what you want to encourage is, it's best when you don't overthink things. You want to make sure you don't wait to start getting value. DevOps brings very tangible value to teams. So let those agile teams start adopting practices and the tools that are delivering value for them, but make sure it's driven by their needs. So you don't have to wait for a whole big coordinated effort, but at the same time, you do need some top-down effort as well, because you want to make sure that every single team isn't reinventing the same wheel. So you don't want to make sure that they're not all building the same automations. They're not all learning how to put together the same tool chains. You want to make sure the teams are learning from each other. So things like, how do you best apply a source control system like Git? Things like branching techniques and merging techniques. And you definitely don't want this an unnecessary sprawl of tools and technologies across the different teams. So, as an example, do you really need in an organization 4 or 5 different source control systems? Probably not. I mean, there's definitely benefits to allowing teams to use the best tool for the job where necessary, but there's a lot of benefits in commonality. So this kind of center of excellence style approach is great to provide that top-down framework to kind of guide teams. So I guess the short answer is, you want to encourage grassroots driven adoption. So really drive it where the real need is. But you're going to use a center of excellence style approach to then guide and empower those teams on their DevOps journeys.
So Greg, I want to keep you on the hot seat, because you've mentioned a lot of really interesting things and really about teams. And so, I mean, with my opening and the discussions from the guys so far, there's now so many elements of ops. You've got your traditional DevOps, you've got AI ops, ML ops, DataOps, SecOps, test ops, all of this, a lot of ops. How do you effectively bring it together? Because the thing is that a lot of these organizations are disparate organizations blown across an entire organization that have, I hate to say it, but not been designed to work together effectively. How do you do it? How do you bring it together? How do you get everybody in the van going in the journey together?
Yeah. So I guess actually the starting point is that you make sure that you understand that whole alphabet soup of DevOps, MLOps, and DataOps, etc. You need to have a very clear understanding of what the value is and what they're all trying to achieve. So that needs to be your starting point. And you need to make sure that your center of excellence mindset. So again, you need to make sure that you're making the most of bottom-up grassroots adoption, kind of agile type adoption of these sorts of techniques. But you do need some sort of overall center of excellence kind of mindset that organizes everything. And you want to make sure, so again, there are these common themes. So things like automation and pipelines and improved visibility, which are going to give you broader benefits across the entire organization as you look at that whole scope of what all those different kind of XOps approaches can bring to bear. So you want to make sure that from day one, and again, it's a journey, so you're not going to do everything on day one, but you want to make sure that your approach and your scope of thinking is about reducing the silos between the different teams. So bring in security, bring in testing, bring in the data teams, and have the vision from day one that you want to use this overall DevOps banner for change to make an optimization across all those team boundaries. It's not something you should do as an afterthought. Again, you're not going to do everything on day one. You're not going to bring in all those teams and flesh everything out on day one. But from day one, your vision should be, how do we bring all of those teams together in IT and along with the business and really optimize the whole way we deliver for the organization.
That's really interesting.
I'd like to add on to that, Greg, if it's okay, is that there's a real tight synergy between the testing ops and the data ops right now, where you can actually automate a lot of the data testing, but it also gives you the foundation for regression testing going forward as you get into a live environment. So those two teams in particular, we've got a lot of synergy right now.
Yeah, and I think we hinted at it earlier, but an application today, I think Wayne said something about data really infusing our applications. There is no such thing as applications without data, except for very trivial examples. So if you're just thinking about DevOps as something that is your operations and development teams, and you don't bring in that thinking from day one on what does this mean for data and our data engineers and our data scientists, then you're going to miss a trick. So that's why you need to really think about how you bring all those teams together, because again, you don't want to shift the bottleneck. So if you've improved your ability to deliver an application quicker, and now your operations team's on board so they can actually deploy it quicker, but you haven't thought about what that means for the data aspects, then you've shifted the bottleneck to the data team, and overall the organization is not going to get the benefit that they need from DevOps.
Greg, I think I'm about to cry. To hear an application guy talk about the importance of data this is amazing.
It took 20 years, right, Wayne? It took us 20 years to get to this point.
It took us 20 years to get to this point.
So one of the things we haven't talked about, I mean, we talked a little bit about it, but we haven't really gone deep in it, is security. And Faz, I know that you're our testing guru, but the idea of security, not only can testing not be an afterthought and the can kick down the road, but also the security side of this, and especially now more than ever with security being just so unbelievably important. We look at all of the data about all the hacks and everything that's happened as a part of the COVID-19 outbreak and the vulnerabilities inside of businesses. Talk to me about how fundamentally important the SecOps side of this is.
Of course, Matt. Well, security testing has always been a very specialist area within testing, undertaken by a team of security experts at the very end of a project to ensure a system didn't contain any security vulnerabilities. Now, the biggest problem with this approach is that penetration testing at the end of a project can sometimes identify serious architectural flaws, which can be extremely time-consuming and expensive to fix. What we're seeing now is forward-thinking organizations are embracing the concept of shifting left with all areas of testing, using automation not only for functional performance testing, but also security testing, each and every time there's a new build created as part of their CI/CD pipeline. Now, more specifically, automated application security scanning as part of your DevSecOps process can identify security flaws very early on in the development process. And it doesn't need to be costly either, Matt. Organizations can leverage open source tools such as Zap integrated into their continuous integration server to get the benefits of shifting left for security testing. And it's this focus on automation and shifting left that's enabling organizations to capitalize on the many benefits that DevOps has to offer. I hope that answers your question, Matt.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect. Now, I'll tell you what, I got to tell you what, I could keep you guys on here all day and we could just talk all day about this. But unfortunately, I don't know if it's the voices in my head or our producer saying that it's time to move on because we've got some really exciting questions that are going on. So I'm going to move over to QA. So again, for those of you that are on, you can just type your question in the chat box, which is either on the right or the bottom, and we'll hammer away and ask away. So looking here, it looks like we've got some pretty good questions. And the first one I'm going to toss over to you, Greg. So we talk a lot about tools. There's a lot of tools that are out there, but we also need to dive into talking about people as well, because you got the tools, but you got the people also. So do enterprises need to retool their people resources in order to leverage DevOps?
I thought you were going to say the most important tool is a rubber chicken.
That's the next question.
So we're going to get to that. We're going to get to that. Right? Let's not jump the gun. So do they need to retool their people? I mean, one of the things about DevOps is it is not something that has just been born in a vacuum as an approach. It is really it's a cumulative new set of techniques, but many of them, well, I guess alongside a set of older techniques that have just been dusted off a bit and been given new relevance. So things like configuration management has been around in IT for a considerably long time, and many of the techniques within DataOps have been with the data teams for decades, let's say. But what DevOps has done, and I think that it really got this from Agile. So Agile really introduced like a new excitement in methodologies in general. I mean, before that, methodologies had a bit of a bad name. Agile brought a new excitement and desire for change, because it really introduced this notion of, a methodology doesn't need to be something that you train all your people up on, and it takes 6 months to a year before everybody starts singing the tune, and then eventually you're going to get some benefits. Agile showed, within a few weeks, we can get some massive benefits for your team. And DevOps with CI/CD and, with all these other techniques has kind of taken that flag forward and really brought about this desire for change. But to get to your question, do you need to retool, replace, when you say retool your people, I almost think you mean toss out some of those old skills and bring in some new ones. No, I mean, those people, especially within the data teams, they have most of the skills required. DevOps has given a fresh relevance to those skills and a fresh way of getting value from those skills. And for the testing teams, test automation has been around for a long time, but now DevOps is saying, well, let's take those automated tests and plug them into a CI/CD cycle, and we're going to get additional value. DataOps is saying, let's use these pipeline views and some of the configuration management and tools that we get with DevOps, and look at that to increase transparency across the team. So it's really about taking those existing skills and adding in that fresh DevOps way of thinking to really reinvigorate the teams.
And if I may chime in a bit here as well, Greg. So you've also got the opportunity out of automation, out of having common processes, to have your key technical architects do architect things as opposed to operational things. And I think that's really important, because you're often in a 24/7 environment. You've often got real-time data feeds that need to be kept correct. You've got to have an efficient break fix process, but you want to be having the success done by the right people. You want to have the architect people building the new exciting projects, while we have the core automated operations just not take care of itself, but be as efficient as possible.
Yeah. And that's actually, if I can just say one other thing, Matt, I mean, so to carry on what Chris was saying there, a key part or a key concern whenever you talk automation in an IT context is often, well, if you're automating things, it's to replace people, right? And what I would say, what I've seen with DevOps is allowing teams. So today, teams are underperforming. And what I mean by that is, there are very few organizations that can say, actually, do you know what? Our teams are delivering at the rate that our business requires. There's no delay, or there's no mismatch between the rate of delivery they require and the rate that we're getting things out the door, or maybe from a cost point of view. So what DevOps allows you to do is actually just catch up to that rate that business really needs to have deliveries made at. And I tell you what, as soon as you catch up, they're going to increase their needs, and DevOps is really going to allow you to keep optimizing to meet that required pace of delivery that the business has, because it's only ever going to get more challenging.
So, all right, Greg. So let's continue on that one. We're talking about optimization, getting the teams to operate more efficiently. So, as we're heading into that DevOps battlefield, what are some of the best accessories for you to take with you? Your bots, or different tool chains, or maybe you pull out of your rucksack a rubber chicken. So,
Absolutely.
you know, how are we getting ready? What tools are we taking with us?
So true story, a rubber chicken is what really got me excited about DevOps, and that's where my DevOps journey started. So I will expand on that story briefly. So DevOps, when we're saying DevOps has been around since the early 2000s, it's not quite true, because the kind of precursor techniques for DevOps were playing out there. So it wasn't really called DevOps in early 2000s. You know, it was all about agile and extreme programming, but they really introduced some of the initial techniques. So I mentioned already continuous integration being that key technique. And I was working in the UK on a big supply chain integration project, and we were running things using extreme programming. It was one of our first agile projects, and in continuous integration, as most folks will know, it's all about automating builds. So people check code into the source control system, and automated build runs. And when that build breaks, it's quite easy to see who broke the build, because you just look to see who made the last commit of code. And that was the person that broke the build. And good continuous integration, extreme programming guidance was the person that broke the build has to stay, can't go home until they fix the build. So it's very important to firstly identify who broke the build. And then it's very important to make sure that they didn't leave the door, because if they left, then the build's broken and nobody else can commit code, because then you're committing bad code potentially on top of bad code, and it just the whole thing falls apart. So what we did was, there was a rubber chicken floating around the office. So somebody had, I don't know where rubber chickens come from. Well, I didn't. Actually, I Googled, and there's a big company in the US, toy company, that makes rubber chickens. I don't know what the purpose is. I can tell you what we used our rubber chicken for. So we decided to give the rubber chicken to whoever broke the build, so that it was clear whose responsibility it was to fix. Now, that was a major eye-opener for me, because up to that stage, I'd been responsible for methodology within the company. So I had quite a focus on methodology and improving the way we delivered and did things in general. But I tell you what, as soon as we started this practice, the first day or so, the build broke. So we set up our continuous integration server. Folks committed code as they used to. The build broke a few times, and we'd have a little ceremony of handing the rubber chicken over to the person that broke it. But strangely enough, after a few days, the build wasn't breaking anymore. And we noticed the team was paying a lot more attention to the quality of the code before they committed it. And as a whole, they were working better together and collaborating better. So they were having more discussions about the code, just to make sure they didn't break the build and they didn't get the rubber chicken. So DevOps, can make a very immediate and tangible change and value, much more so than other methodologies. And the benefits can be huge. So, I saw that it bringing about a real change of team behavior. You could ask if we'd have the same change if we hadn't had the rubber chicken. I think we would have. Just makes for a more interesting story. But from that point on, I was pretty much sold on DevOps.
Excellent. I know we're getting really tight on time, but I've got one more question that I want to ask. So I want to grab the rubber chicken and pass it over to Faz. So what does the company need to do in order to, prepare for, implementing test automation into their DevOps life cycle?
Right, thanks, Matt. Well, I think too many people get caught up in implementing tools to fast track DevOps and test automation as part of DevOps within their organizations. And often this approach can often lead to many challenges and issues. Those organizations that have the greatest success in implementing DevOps have typically taken a more holistic approach to implementing it based on people, process, and tools. DevOps more generally requires a great cultural shift, I think, which Greg and others have touched on already, to the way that people work. So it's all about getting buy-in from all areas of an organization, from C-level stakeholders through to the dev, test, and operations teams. And as a first step, should be about supporting your people in moving to more agile and automated ways of delivering. And once they've been given the right training and support, then you look at what processes need to be put in place to support your people. And once you've got that right, you should start looking at what tools best support both your people and processes. And every organization will have a different journey to DevOps, as I think the whole team mentioned. For instance, a new small digital company can more easily implement agile processes than a large established bank, which has to work to additional regulations. So it's all about what suits your organization best. And I think a good motto can be start small, learn, improve, and expand. That's always a sensible approach, Matt. Hopefully that answers your question.
It definitely does. And I think, unfortunately, that's all the time we're going to have. But I'll tell you what, I mean, there's so many exciting questions that have come up, and you guys have done such a brilliant job. You know, I think we're going to have another DevOps discussion in the season 2 of the Prolifics Innovation Sandbox. So now we're leaving people with some exciting stuff to look forward to. So, you know, it is all the time that we have. First of all, Ops team, I'd like to thank you so much for coming to play with me inside the Prolifics Innovation Sandbox. I can't thank you enough. Since we're all virtual, I'd like to give you a virtual fist bump. And to our audience, thank you for stopping by. And we really want you to come by next week, next Thursday, for the final episode in season 1 of the Innovation Sandbox, which will be hosted by none other than Greg Hodgkinson. And, you know, the title for next week is Tales from the Sandbox. You're going to learn all about how, you drive innovation with inside of your organization. So it's going to be really, really exciting. So please don't miss next week's episode. So until then, keep well and keep innovating.